Very good. Nice fish.
My name is Captain Hap Farrell. I run a charter boat out of Rock Harbor, and I fish the waters of Cape Cod Bay. As you can see here, this young lady is doing quite well jigging with wire off the bottom. She happens to be using 450 feet of wire, and we're jigging in deep water. The jigging method, or the method of jigging, is probably the most productive method that we have in Cape Cod Bay for most any area that you might want to fish in. And most of the guys use a very, very stiff rod, a pretty good sized reel, and they just crank the fish in. I like to use a reel and a rod system that's a little bit more of a challenge to both you and the fish. A lighter action gear, as you see being used right here. This woman here is demonstrating how to jig while sitting in the chair. Watch her frequency and how she moves the rod. It's not a big long sweep or a jerk. It's a nice even pull. Here you'll see her jigging by hand. This is the favored way by most of the commercial guys. You can feel the jig a lot better. And again, you're only moving your hand 8 to 10 inches, and it works quite well. You can feel the fish on, then you let it go. And here she's got probably a small bluefish or a small bass on the rods I use for the most part for jigging, and they're nice light action rods.
But in a little bit we're going to try out the light stuff. You've used that before.
Here this woman is using my really light jigging rod system. These are very light rods I got from Shakespeare, using a smaller reel, 30-pound test wire and 80-pound test backing, and she's jigging by hand again. And this is basically a bait casting rod, and you'll see it in action.
Now, of all the jigging gear that you like to use, is this better than the heavier stuff? Okay, he's letting you know he's there?
I had a wire part on one of my better jigging rods, which is sometimes happens. Well, anyway, the gentleman there on the right is using my backup rod, which is a little stiffer than my regular gear, pretty much like everybody else's. And he just landed a nice fish there. His mother, just to his left, has got a really nice fish on using the lighter gear that I've got. She's getting a little help, but she's not having as hard of a time as her son did.
Stop reeling. All right, nice fish. Look up this way for a second. All right, here you can see the bend in the rod, or the action of the rod. This is considered an extra heavy action for this rod anyway. And you can see I'm putting some pretty good juice to this. And you can see the bend in the rod, and it has to be this stiff in order to get the jig to work. Why I like this particular rod better than the stiffer ones is it also gives you some nice action with a big fish on, or if unfortunately we're not getting those big fish, we're only getting the smaller ones, you can still feel the fish and have fun playing with it rather than just cranking it in with a broomstick. Now, I have people who really like light action gear, and sometimes jigging is the only way you can get the fish. So I developed this by getting a smaller reel here. This is a reel made by Penn. It's a level line. And I've got 30-pound test wire and backing. And this rod I found it developed by Shakespeare, and the guides on it can handle the wire. It is a fairly light action rod, actually a bait casting rod used for pike and pickerel and such up on the Great Lakes. But I had to put a roller tip on it in order for the wire to go through the front guide better. And the action on this rod is considerably better for those who like to use light action gear, but when jigging is the only method that works, we can still get the fish. I started getting into the light tackle a number of years ago, both with monofilament, lead core, and wire. The folks at the Goose Hummock here have helped me immensely to sit down and design and pick out the style of rods I want for
for the action I'm looking for. I would suggest if you're looking for a certain type of rod to do a certain thing, you discuss it with these guys, and they will help you out and get you going in the direction you want to go. Remember, just take your time. Get him in the boat. Yeah, that's every bit as big.
Nice, Eddie.
Now we're doubled up. You're watching my favorite jig rods in action. As you can tell, they can take on any size fish you want to put to them. They were actually designed to vertically jig tuna fish, and they can take up to a 350-pound tuna fish. So the rods will hold up.
Yeah, knowing that this road I'm wandering on, from time to time, always leads me home.
Jimmy, the mate here, is showing them how to use my really light jigging rod system. You have to jig by hand. And you'll see that this 30-pound test wire on these very nice limber rods are equal to any of the bass we were catching up here on the West Bar off Barnstable Harbor. All right, now turn around real quick because we got other things to do. Okay, Jimmy.
Telling all them stories that we just can't get enough of. Somewhere in an honest land, it'll finally hit me that I'm home.
Oh, Jesus.
All right. Most of those who fish Cape Cod Bay would be proud to come in showing off the fish that they're catching here. And just imagine telling your friends you caught it with a bait casting rod using 30-pound test wire. They'd look at you and say, no, you didn't, you couldn't have. But as you can well see, you can.
And knowing that this road I'm wandering on, from time to time, always leads me home. Back
That's a big one. We can tell it's a monster. We're gonna need a bigger boat. In developing these new jigging rods, what I'm trying to accomplish is to get a jigging rod that will pull the jig along the bottom correctly so the fish will be attracted to the jig, yet still give the same action you get with those like those little light Shakespeare rods that I have. It's a tough situation to accomplish because you need that stiffness to make the jig work right. Anyway, it will aid the little kids. It'll make it easier for them to jig and to get some pretty nice bass, because the energy of the fish will come up through the wire, which doesn't stretch, and get to the rod, and the rod will absorb a lot of the energy along with the drag and the reel, so that the angler gets to play the fish and not get as tired as hopefully the fish does. The other reason I'm trying to develop these light action jigging rods you can jig from the chair is just for this reason here. We get a family out. I want a rod that the whole family can use. The kids can have a good time with it and land a fish on their own. The mother or the wife who's never fished before can enjoy using wire And the husbands, if they've fished, the men will have a challenge with a lighter rod. You don't know how many times I've heard, well, we want to go out and catch some fish, but we don't want to use that heavy wire stuff anymore. It's harder for the kids. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to make something that works a lot easier for everybody. Right here you see the reels that most of the guys use, or the size of the reel. They're very substantial reels, will hold the backing and the wire needed to jig properly. What I'm looking for is a smaller reel with a little bit more of a sensitive drag to it, that with this lighter wire and these lighter action rods will work better. Will give the angler the comfort of a nice reel, but something substantial enough to handle a nice big fish on this wire. I'd like to take the opportunity here to thank those at the Goose Hummock who've advised me and helped me in designing and building these light action jigging rods. I've been fishing for most of the time I've been on the Cape, which is going back to the mid-50s. And all the folks here have been doing basically the same. So their opinions and thoughts are valued extremely so. And I've been trading here at the Goose Hummock since I've been on the Cape on my own. At any rate, it's well worth coming to the store. The reel I chose to put on these rods is the Penn Fathom 60 LD, meaning level wind. And it'll hold all of the line and wire that I need and give me the sensitive drag that I'm looking for. Sean, you've done a lot of fishing before, and you've jigged with wire and jigged with a heavy wire. Now this rod is designed initially so that young children and women who've never fished before and guys who don't like to use heavy wire will be able to jig and enjoy the fight of the fish. Do you feel that this rod's got enough guts to it to bring the jig across the bottom to give the fish, will attract the fish?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it has a lot of power in the busting. There's a nice light tip. It's physically very light. I like it.
All right, thank you. Okay, Adrian, you've jigged with wire before. You don't know me from a hole in the wall. So your opinion will be valuable here. I've designed these rods for little kids to fish with, to jig from the chair, because they can't jig by hand. It can be a little dangerous, all right? But still give a light enough action that the rod will absorb most of the energy from the fish and allow the child or woman or who's, you know, the novice, the ability to land a fish, even a big 40-pound fish. And also those people who do like to fish but don't like to use heavy rods and reels and wire, but this will also give them the ability to fight a fish with a nice action rod. Do you think this rod's capable of doing that?
I do. I think it'd be good for kids.
Yeah,
sure.
Because you know, it's a tough line to do where you've got the rod strong enough to jig, to make the jig work right, but yet light enough action.
What ounce jig do you plan on using with this?
It's a 2-ounce jig.
2 ounce.
Yeah, I'm going to a lighter jig, and that's 40-pound test wire rather than the heavier 50 or 60. So you'd have fun with it, let's say.